Joola Mod TA-15 Alibaba clone for only $30? If the real mod is $280, you're telling me I'm paying $250 just for a Joola logo? Oh, Alibaba, please don't let me down like last time with the Gen 3 clones. Hey y'all, it's DY Pickleball bringing you a review video of the Alibaba Mod TA-15 clone. This video has been requested by several of you, and so I would totally appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. All the paddles shown in this video were purchased by my own money. I was not sponsored or paid to give a review for any of these paddles. I actually purchased 2 mod clones given the price point, and they came completely unbranded. My mod clones were supposed to arrive about 30 days from order, which is typical lead time for paddles on Alibaba. I actually got them in about 2 weeks, which is faster than usual. I also ordered the real Joola Mod TA-15 for comparison purposes. As you can see, it comes in with much more branding. The immediate difference that sticks out is the clear as day Joola logo printed near the throat of the paddle. The next difference is the notice about the NFC chip and also the Joola branding on the edge guard. Oh, and we mustn't forget the Joola logo on the butt cap on the real mod. I shouldn't sell Joola short. The extra $250 is for 3 logos, not just 1. Taking a closer look at the prints on the face, the real mod has an NFC chip marking as well as a USAP approved logo. If you look at the Alibaba clone, it also has the same markings and logos. You'll see in a second though that the NFC marking is meaningless and likely the USAP approved logo as well. As far as I'm aware, the Alibaba clones are simply just clones and not actually the same paddle or actually endorsed by Joola or USAP, which is why they cannot use this Joola logo anywhere on the paddle. It's also very unlikely that you could use the clones at a sanctioned tournament, so keep that in mind if you are a tournament player. Other than that, the Perseus Mod TA-15 text is pretty on point when compared side by side, except that the clone's text appears a little more faded. Going back to the NFC chip, you can see that the Alibaba clone doesn't actually have an NFC chip inside and doesn't respond to holding your phone over the handle. The real mod, of course, does respond with this NFC chip. The chip is used by Joola to identify authentic mods, so of course the clones won't be able to replicate this. When comparing the shapes of the 2 paddles, I found the clone to be fairly true to the real mod, except it appeared to be a little wider both at the throat and at the top. This didn't end up making much of a difference in playability, however. Due to the slight shape difference, I measured the 2 paddles and found that the Alibaba clone face was nearly exactly 16.5 by 7.5, whereas the real mod was just short by a few tenths of an inch. Again, it wasn't enough to make a difference in playability. As for the weight, both paddles came in at an 8.1 ounces, which is within measuring error of the reported 8 ounces. The balance point is also nearly identical. So far, the Alibaba seems to be a really good clone of the original. The one major difference I'll point out is that the clone has a smaller grip than the real mod. The clone's grip is also perforated versus the real mod is a regular grip. I actually prefer the clone's grip being smaller because with the real mod, I cannot put on an overgrip and feel comfortable with the handle size. Since the Gen 3s are infamous for their sounds when they hit the ball, I decided to run a sound test again. And this time I also included the old banned Gen 3 Perseus. As you can hear, there's inconsistent sounds between all 4 paddles, and what's most surprising is the inconsistent sound between the 2 Alibaba mods that supposedly came from the same manufacturer. I suspect the inconsistencies come from how core crushed the paddles are coming out of the factory. Pickleball Studio does a great video on this and also a great podcast episode on this very fact, highlighting some of the inconsistencies and how easily the real mods core crush. And I suspect the Alibaba mods also have this similar issue.
I also noticed after cutting my mod open that one side of the core was slightly crushed. Not severely, but it was there. Some people have claimed their mods don't hit as hard as their Gen 3, but from what I've observed so far and what we saw with the Gen 3s, that likely has to do with how crushed your core is or isn't out of the box. Several people have claimed the more they used the mod, it got closer to a Gen 3, but for me, both of mine felt exactly the same as a Gen 3 right out of the box. So given that it appears the design is the same, the only difference I can think of why people would experience this is because of the cores changing over time. Basically, here's the deal, and this explains so much of the Gen 3s and I guess the mod, but the mod hasn't been around as long. So they obviously seem to core crush a lot, at least in our area. With big hitters, they crush all the time. I mean, this weekend, the mod, the guy at League, I literally heard his paddle from one court over. He must have hit a forehand drive, and I immediately went, well, whatever. I was like, that's either a gearbox or a Joola, and it is completely destroyed. Like it was like a loud gunshot.
Oh, trust me,
ear.
I had the same thought. I walked in and I heard it and immediately went, huh. Where's that? Yeah. And I knew the second I heard it, I knew exactly what it was. And then when I looked at who it was, I went, I'm not surprised.
Compounding the effect of inconsistent core crushing out of the box is the fact that there's a million different clone manufacturers out there on both Alibaba and AliExpress. This means that people will likely get very different experiences with these clones. I'll link the specific mod clone that I used for this video down in the description below. If you do choose to purchase a product with my affiliate link, I receive a small commission to help support the channel. When I search through Reddit threads about these clones, some say it plays about the same, but others say that it's not quite as powerful. I'll also leave links below of listings that were recommended on Reddit. If anyone wants to try or has tried them before, please comment below your experience. I know several of you requested to have the clones cut open to examine the cores in my previous Alibaba video. Unfortunately, this is a small-time channel that I'm mainly operating out of passion, and beyond the cost of just the paddle, there's also the cost of finding the proper equipment and expertise to cut the paddle open safely. Therefore, there won't be a cutting open video, but I'm planning on making it happen as a 1,000 subscriber special. So please subscribe to this channel if you want to help make it happen. There is a video on the main product page that shows the paddle being cut open and showing foam in the core, but it's possible this video is recycled amongst all of the listings, as I see this video in almost every Alibaba listing. Alright, let's talk about the playtest. No matter how bad the core crushing is, I can handle it, right?
A few moments later.
Yeah, the first Alibaba mod clone of the two I played with was actually the hardest paddle to control that I've ever played with. Initially, I had a lot of trouble resetting the ball without it popping up. My dinking is already the weakest part of my game, and using the Alibaba clones made it much worse. The paddle just felt like a mini trampoline in my hand, and I really had to adjust my technique to rein it in. After a few days of changing my technique to let the paddle do the work instead of my body, the power benefit really started showing. When playing with the paddle amongst Gen 2 paddles, it was clear as day that the sound was significantly deeper than the other paddles. Take a listen for yourself. The ball was also coming off my paddle face much faster than my opponent's paddles, helping me win a lot of firefights and put away balls more easily. My opponents told me that it was really jarring for them, as the pace of the ball deflecting off my paddle is not expected given the moderate swing I took to hit the ball. And others would just grunt in disgust. Compared to my main paddle, the Honolulu Pickleball J2K, the Alibaba clone I first used was clearly a big step up in power while being harder to control. However, I had forgotten what it felt like to play with the Gen 3 paddle in general, so I borrowed my buddy Ryan's old Joola Gen 3 Perseus that had been banned by the USAP just to get a comparison. Within a few minutes of drilling with it, I was completely startled at how different the Gen 3 played compared to the Alibaba mod clone I was using. The Gen 3 was so much easier to control, and I was able to reset and dink on a similar level as my J2K, while being nowhere near as loud or as powerful as my Alibaba mod clone. At this point, I suspected my first mod clone to be core crushed, and I knew I had to test this against the actual Joola mod to get to the bottom of this. Most people, including Pickleball Studio, reported the real mod to be very similar to the old Gen 3s. My experience was the same. As soon as I started playing with the real mod, it felt way more controllable than my first Alibaba clone. It was still fairly powerful though, and I was still able to get my bags, but nowhere near as obscene as my first Alibaba clone. It led to a lot of fun points where, although the mod was more powerful than the other Gen 2 paddles on the court, it didn't feel like some cheat code during the game. At this point, I was fairly sure my first Alibaba clone was Core Crush, though not to the degree it made sounds when I pressed on the center. I decided to specifically dedicate a drill session to compare the two Alibaba clones to see if the second clone was any different. Thankfully, the second Alibaba clone, as predicted from the sound testing, did not feel anywhere near as uncontrollable as the first. Similar to the real mod, I was able to successfully reset, dink, and drop without having to change my technique too much. The power was still good while not feeling like a cheat code. The funny thing was, my duo partners and I immediately noticed the sound was nowhere near as deep as the first clone. I actually initially mislabeled my clips when editing this video, and I was able to disambiguate the two paddles based on sound alone. I'll let you listen in. After all of this playtesting and comparison, I would say if you purchase these mod clones, be prepared for inconsistent quality. I would definitely consider playing with my second clone, as it does not appear to be core crushed and played most similarly to the real mod, but there's a decent chance you may end up getting a paddle like my first clone. Fortunately, Alibaba does offer a pretty easy return process if you do get a bad paddle. To be fair to the Alibaba clones though, the real Joola mods also have a similar inconsistent core crushing issue, as documented by Pickleball Studio earlier in their video and podcast. So, in conclusion, my trash bin returns. The old Gen 3 goes in the trash because it's banned. The real Joola mod goes in the trash for making me pay $250 for a logo. The first Alibaba clone goes in the trash for being core crushed. The second Alibaba clone I'll keep as an alternative to my main J2K paddle, as long as it doesn't also core crush. Links and coupon codes in the description below. Thanks all for watching and supporting this channel.